So let's talk. Well, thanks, Megan, for the presentation first. Very interesting. Now, my subject is a bit more on the plant side because polar bears don't eat plants, from what I got. But we do as humans, we eat plants. So, but I'm going to look at how we can sustainably increase plant productivity. So, this is a nice cornfield. You can see that it's pretty dense. There's a lot of biomass. We can imagine that there's a lot of nutrients being produced here. If we look at world debt by famine, these are 40 years de tranche in French. You can see that we basically eradicated, or not eradicated, but greatly reduced the number of debt every year, millions of debt by growing these types of crops, right? Which was the green revolution, which is thanks to, in part, pesticides and GMOs and all these highly producing hybrids like corn. So even if the world population almost, times 10 in this time frame, we reduce famine, right? Which is a very interesting exploit as a species, right? As humans. And here we can see that the yield, so productivity of 1 hectare of a plot in Minnesota, right? So from about 100 years ago, we tripled our yield. So for the same land, we can make 3 times more food. So that's pretty interesting. But that comes with the price, which is the fertilizer use, right? So fertilizer, mainly urea or other, we added, 3,000 kilogram per hectare. So that's all well. So basically, we've solved a lot of problems with this green revolution, but we've also created some other, right? So this is a nice cornfield after harvest, which is bare, and you can see this erosion. So that's kind of a problem because soil erosion, at the rate we're using it, it's a non-renewable resource. So soil is going to be depleted if we continue like this. Also, there's some other problems like bee death and other biodiversity collapse. So that's a little flustering. We also have the fact that our food now is less nutritious than if it was grown on an organic. So all these inorganic fertilizer, they make up empty biomass or biomass that's less rich in secondary metabolites. Secondary metabolites are like vitamins and antioxidants. So our food is less nutritious than before. So that's kind of flustering. And also, we have these types of things now that happen. So if you have a cottage or sometimes near a lake, you will see these and you can't swim in it. That's a process called eutrophication. So let's just go briefly over what is eutrophication. So first up, you fertilize your field to get that nice corn yield, but as some farmers like to put a lot of fertilizer, you see it in Minnesota, they put 3,000 kilogram per hectare or something. Now there's soil leaching and runoff. So that plant food here, nitrogen and phosphorus, ends up in our lakes. And now what happens is there's an algae bloom. So the plant grow, but not the good kind of plants. Then the algae blocks the sun. It kills our aquatic plants our and their decay causes a lot of consumption of oxygen, and then there's no more oxygen and the fish die. So that's sad. So this is the buzzword of the day, eutrophication. You can now explain what's eutrophication. But when you're dealing with farmers, because I'm also a trained agrologist, you gotta think in their terms and you gotta tell them, hey, you're putting money down the drain, right? The fertilizer you're using, you're not using it correctly if you're wasting it in eutrophiking lakes, right? So my question, and that's how my research starts, is what if there was a way to prevent water contamination while still providing nutrients to plants? So that's where hydroponics steps in. So hydroponics, no more soil. You can reuse your solution. You can produce up to 50 times the same biomass in a given area. It's very wonderful, right? But so what is hydroponic? Briefly, you get your solution here. You have to aerate it and have it circulate through the roots of your plants. And you put some plant food in and you get your yield and you're pretty happy. But the reality is that even hydroponic producer at the moment, they're wasting a lot of their fertilizer. So we're back at square one. We still have eutrophication of lakes. We still have loss of fertilizer in our environment. And that's in Canada, at least only 1 out of 3 producer reuse their fertilizer. So majority of producers are wasteful. But so the question is, why can't they recirculate? Why don't they just recirculate, right? So when you make your plant food, at the start, you got your optimal concentration here. No, not too much, not deficient. You pass it one. The plant is gonna uptake more nitrogen and potassium than phosphorus. So after one pass, your fertilizer isn't as optimal as it was, right? There's too much phosphorus and not enough nitrogen. And then after a second pass, you just got this toxic juice, which if you leave it like that, your plants are gonna die. So that's not good. And that's mainly because that's what hydroponic producers are using, pH and EC, which are very old, at least 50-year-old technology, which only monitor two parameters of your soil solution. So let's go back to square one. We got this highly producing field, but it creates eutrophication. So we got this highly productive uh, plant factory, also eutrophication. So that's caused by the runoff and also because there's a lack in the technology available. So what I'm doing is I'm using more technology to palliate this issue, and those are these guys. I'm just using more electrodes. So instead of just monitoring pH and EC, I'm also monitoring nitrogen, calcium, potassium, and magnesium, for example, which are all plant food. So, in a nutshell, I can monitor the nutrients, the exact nutrients, not just some baseline conductivity tool. I can increase the efficiency and I can decrease the externalities of the system, right? So it doesn't eutrophy lake. So that's me in a lab during confinement. So coffee, robots, plants. That's what I've been working with the past 2 years now. So here's a system I put up. So we have three different treatments. So each tube is one solution. Those are basil plants. So this is the robot I made for it, and you can see here those are these little electrodes I'm talking about. So potassium, calcium, ammonium, and nitrate, which are both nitrogenous compounds which are plant available. So I'm monitoring the solution that's going in and making sure they have enough of all these nutrients, which is a step further than what they were doing before with only conductivity and pH. So then you take this raw data because these electrodes don't give you concentration, they only speak in voltage. So you got to speak a little bit of computer if you want to see what's going on in the solution. And then you grow plants, and you can see here. So Hoagland, or HOAG, is inorganic, only inorganic. OLF is for organic liquid fertilizer, and OLF plus is a mix of both. So you can see there's some deficiencies in both of them, right? So Hoagland is inorganic, OLF is organic liquid fertilization, and I have to say something that in Canada, hydroponic cannot be organic, so we're gonna have to change this name. But let's say OLF for the sake of this presentation. But hydroponic cannot be organic in Canada, but in the US, yes. But we can talk about that later. So here's the yield, right? So even if there's deficiency, we've had the same yield. So there's no statistically significant difference between the treatments. So a plant is going to weigh about 35 grams. What's the real interesting fact here is that the total nitrate input, so the total fertilizer I've used for each treatment, so the one here, I've used about three times less nutrients. So if it's brown, it comes from organic matter, or some other people might call it chicken poop. And if it's blue, it comes from a lab, right? So we can get the same yield by using manure, which is on the farm already. This inorganic compounds, we got to ship it. So there's all this environmental impact that goes into calculating the real impact of using this technology. We can decrease the input. And I'm also working on cannabis because there's been a lot of research in hydroponics since it's been legalized. And I have some interesting results, but I cannot show them because of some legal concentration. But this is an article that came out in 2020. So plant secondary metabolites, vitamins, antioxidant, but also cannabinoids are plant secondary metabolite. They can be increased if you use calcium-based microparticles. And if you remember, I have an electrode that can look at the calcium content in the solution. So I can officially fertilize calcium in cannabis plants hypothetically, and I can see some change in it. So that's another aspect that's interesting. Increasing yield. So you had one example where I decrease input and one example when I increase yield. So as a summary, hydroponic, you can use 95% less water because you can capture it. So and you don't lose it through soil leaching, and you can stop pollution. You can reuse your fertilizer continuously. You don't have to buy new one. You don't have to ship it from the fertilizer plant. Um, the plant grows faster in hydroponic because it doesn't have to create a bigger root system, because it doesn't have to anchor itself to the soil. So it grows faster. You can grow vertically. And in the Netherlands, they're producing 50 times more tomatoes per hectare than a soil counterpart. But with the calcium boosting, for example, you can make it more nutritious. So you can even increase the nutritional efficiency of the food, and then you can grow anywhere. And when I mean anywhere, I mean, yes, in the desert where they don't have a lot of water, that's pretty convenient. But you gotta start thinking about the big picture, right? People don't know where food is produced, but what if we were producing it in our cities? So here's a nice picture of what I like to see in the future: green cities, highly producing, clean water because we can reuse it efficiently, and people knowing where their food comes from and having it produced sustainably and locally. And also, as a I'm a fan of sci-fi and other space travel news. These types of technology have piqued the interest of NASA. They're looking into it to use it as a potential way to decrease the input needed to sustain an astronaut in space. Right? If you want him to eat healthy tomatoes instead of dry rations, then you get yourself a better deal. So they have less mass to haul over in space. So that's the idea of my research. I'm trying to decrease input and increase yield with a lot of technology, and so far I'm happy with it. I've had some problem, but that's the life. So I would like to thank the Lister family, EXCA, Circulus, and QAQCC, which have all been funded my research. And if you have any questions, I will be here. These are my references. If you're interested in reading them, I can send them to you. And yeah, so that's my research.